In this video, we'll be learning everything about N8N's core nodes. That includes code node, edit fields, filter, switch, convert to file, and then extract from file, merge if, and the HTTP request, execute, and respond to webhook. There are a few nodes which are not included here. For example, I didn't add the date and time. I didn't add any of these. But whatever I didn't add here is extremely basic. For example, the crypto utility function. So you can just select your hash and it just gives you the value. So whatever I did not include here, you probably wouldn't need. And this is all you need to do any kind of task. So let's start one by one on what we're going to do. Right, so let's start from this. What I'll do is actually remove these nodes from here, and I will just execute this command so I can have some data to pass through all these nodes and show you what each of them do. And I'll also be telling you which node to use in a specific situation and how it can help you do it easily rather than going for some hard decision that might complicate the issue for you. So now I have this AI agent output, and if I see closely, the prompt I gave it was output a story with 10 small chapters. So now if I look at the table, I have these 10 chapters, and you can see it has a little bit of text and the story. And the reason why I separated these chapters is to show you when I use the loop tool, and I also use some other tools. Right, so I can use the same output to show you the code, so I don't have to have multiple input items to loop over things. So let's get started with a code node. So in the code node, you can see the mode. So either you can run once for all items or run for each. So in the last video or one before that, I showed you how you can see the number of items between nodes. So this is how the nodes look, right? And you can either see 1 or you can see 11, which I think was in the last video. So here you can see 1 item, right? So if you have these multiple items and you select this option, so if you select run once for all items, what's actually going to happen is it is just going to run one time. And it'll also throw you an error because it has 11 items. So now it does not know what it has to do. Like if you pass an input, there are 11 inputs. So it doesn't know what exactly should it take and process it with. The other thing that you need to know, the other option is run once for each item. This is going to run once for every item. So if you have 11 items, just like here, so suppose I just bring it here, 11 items, you have this code node, and so this is going to run 11 times. So you have 11 numbers here using which you want to operate something and do other things and make some modifications to that value. So if you do this option, which is run once for each item, it is going to do something to those 11. It is going to do the commands you state to those all 11 terms, right? So that is the first thing. The next is the language. So either you can use JavaScript or you can use Python, which is still in beta. So if you know JavaScript, that is great. But if you don't know, you don't need to worry. You have ChatGPT. And there are a few other options. For example, I think there are extensions like N8N GPT, N8N Boy, but sometimes they don't write good enough code, especially for the beginner tasks. It can be pretty good. But as I do something complex, they never give me the correct options. So I just use ChatGPT. Or if you're using MCP, which I made a video about, that can also generate pretty good code. So now what I'll do is come in the code node and I'll execute for once only. I just want to run it once. I'm going to take this node and then I'll input it. I'll just say const input. That means constant input. That is just I made an input constant. And then this will be equal to this output. So now if you think about it, I have this code, all this information here in this input variable. So rather than writing manual code, what I can just do is take this thing and then take this output and I will just head to ChatGPT. And whenever you're trying to get code from GPT, tell it you're in N8N. If you don't tell it, sometimes it gives you the code which is not optimized for N8N, or it's not returning an array, which is a requirement in N8N. So I'll paste the content now, and I'll also paste the little code snippet. To separate chapters in N8N, it's just going to give me this code block, and let's see the output. And then it's using these special characters to define the chapters and all these things, and then match it and return an array. And that is what we need. So now it has separated the title, chapter, name, and content for us. So now we have all these things. And now you can see we have 10 items here. So if I do anything now, it will have 10 items. The next thing I want to show you is this edit fields now. And this is extremely important when you're trying to have some data and you want to structure it in some way. So I'll connect this code node to edit fields. And then what I'll do is add a new field. I'll say name, and the name should be the chapter name. So I'll add it here. And now if I execute it, you'll see that I have 10 items. I have all the chapter names here. So when you're trying to configure data to send in some other application, so suppose you want to send information to Google Sheets, and in your workflow, you have this node which produces the information, and this is the node which sends data to Google Sheets. Right, so either the data can be completely clean or formatted in a way which should be no problem for Sheets, so you can just send it. But I always include this step in the middle to format the data as I want. So I have this extra protection layer which I can use to configure how the data is formatted properly and then send it to Google Sheets. The next node is the filter node, which is pretty easy to understand. You just have the value and you have these other value and you can have multiple conditions. So to demonstrate the filter, what I'll do is add this here, and in the edit field, I'm going to make another field and I'll say chapter. And then I will add this number here. So now I have 10 numbers, 1 to 10, perfect. So now what I'll do is take this number from here, the chapter, and if the value, I'll use the number node. So you can compare the values using different formats. So you can use string, number, date and time, and all these things. So I'll use a number format, and I will say if it's greater than 4, then you should give me the output. And now I try to run it, and it tells me that the item type is wrong. So the issue is emerging from the last node because I didn't configure it to be a number. I made it a string, which was the default. So I should make it a number and then re-execute it. And now if I re-execute the filter node, you will see I have 6 items. I'll have 5 to 10 because it should be greater than 4. So you can use this filter node to filter out your data. And there's also a way to remove duplicates using filter as well, but you don't need to do that because there is a remove duplicates node built into N8N. So you can just use that when you're trying to find anything regarding the duplication of data. Now to show you the next node, which is the merge node, I need some data. So the merge node is pretty easy to understand. It's merging some data. But when exactly do you want to use it? So generally, all the data is carried over to the next node from N8N. So suppose I connect this again. Now you will see that I'm able to see all the outputs here, right? So if I want to use the output for the AI agent, which is here, I can just use it here. If I want to use the output from the code node, I can use it from here. But this is not the case when you're using binary data. So the binary data is implemented in a weird way in N8N. So if I remove this now and download some binary data, which I already configured, so if I download this image, and this is the image I downloaded from Google Drive, which I had already uploaded. Now, if I connect this to this node, or I can just take it from here and add here. So if I run this now, I download another image, which is this image, right? So I have 2 images now. And everything is great. So I have the data which I downloaded from Google Drive here, and the second image is here, as you can see, and the last one is here. But suppose now I run the code node, right? And in this code node, everything would work except I would have to change this. So the input is not directly available now. The input has to be taken from this node. And there you go. So now it works perfectly, and I'll run these 2 nodes as well. Perfect. So now if I look here, I can access the image data from binary from the previous ones as well. Right, but if I want to access 2 of them, I cannot do that. So suppose I wanted to add multiple images here. I wanted to do something about it. So I go to the Google Drive node, and I can see the binary. Perfect. So now I just add data, and then I can enable some binary field, and that would get me the image. But I want both the images here. I can have all the data from the previous nodes, but I cannot have all the binary data from the previous nodes. So to fix that, you need merge node. And most of the times, that is the only reason why I've used the merge node, to merge binary data. Because you can access all the other data directly. You can just have the output, you can have all the text, you have everything here. But you just do not have binary data. Now what I'll do is take the input from this and this Google Drive, and this is going to show you both the inputs. There you go. So now I have both the inputs in one. The next node is extract from file. So the general use of this node is when you're working with binary data, which is being transferred across servers. So all the data is binary, even the images, audio, video, everything is binary inside the computer. So when you're transferring it between servers, the API providers and yourself as well, you can just convert the file to the base 64 string. And then when the person receives it, they will get this base 64 string, and they can convert it back to file. That is the idea. If you have been using API providers like Fal and Runware, so you generally get these kind of files, and you have to convert them back. So let me just add this here, or maybe I'll just remove one of these filters. I just want one of the output, right? So now I have one image, And there you go. I have the data as base64 string. So there are multiple operations here. You can convert a simple file to all these formats, but I'll just show you this. So now this is a base64 string, and this is an image. And there's another node which is convert to file, on which you give this base64 string and you get the file. So how you can do that is take this, and I'll connect this node here. I'll add the data here. And if I execute this, you will see I get back the image, the exact one. And there are more advantages to using base64 over general images and videos, because the data is simply a text. That is one thing. You can separate data into multiple parts. Like you can also separate images and all these things, but breaking down images, music files, that is a lot of hassle. So suppose you have this text and this is the image. You can just separate the text into 2 or 3 parts if it's too big. Then you can send it one by one. And then you can just append text one onto the other, and you have this entire text, which is for the image. And then you can take this and convert it back to image. So it is much easier to send this base64 string than to send the image. So the next node is a switch node. This is useful when the if-else node fails. So before I even show you this, let me show you the if-else node. Right. So what I'll do is break this chain from here and take this, add it to the code, and bring this here. So now if I run this, I think everything should work. I have my chapters and I bring it to if. So I had 10 chapters. I filtered out 4 of them and now I have 6 remaining, right? So what I'll do now is take this chapter value here, and then I will say this should be a number and it should be greater than 8. So if the value is greater than 8, I'll get these chapters. So I get 4 as false, 2 as true, which is 9 and 10. Perfect. So now I can do whatever I want. So suppose I want to run 2 different workflows, something here and the other thing which goes here. I can use this to do that. So if you just have 2 conditions, if and else, this is perfect for you. You do not need switch. But if you have more than 2 conditions, this is where the switch comes in. So you can have multiple conditions. You can have one more routing rule, and I'll also remove this filter because I want all 10 inputs, right? So let me just add this here. So now I have 5 routing rules. What I'll do is add chapter here and then take it as a number, and I'll say it should be equal to 7. So the 7th chapter goes here. Then I'll say the other value should be greater than 7. I'll just select greater than here and then 7. So everything greater than 7 goes here. Now I'll select number value should be less than, and I will say 7. So everything less than 7 actually will go here. So I'll have to remove this. I made a typo, and I'll add the chapter here. Then if the number is 1, if the chapter is 1, that should go here. So now I have 4 routing rules. And this is useful when you want to have separate things for separate data. So suppose you're building some complex workflow, for example, like a lead generation agent, right? So you have this lead gen system, you have this AI system, which has qualified some leads to some degree. You have hot leads, you have warm leads, you have some kind of discovery phase, and you have cold leads. So you have these 4 conditions. So you can have 4 of these setups going here. And then you can have separate workflows for each of these sections. So that's where the switch node comes in. So now you can see I have these 4 options. In the first option, I get the 7th chapter. I want to do something with it. Then for the second one, I get these 3. And then for the third one, I get 1 to 6. Now for the 4th one, if you look closely, you will see that I have nothing. So you might think, why is that? So the reason is, so the number of data points you have, you can only use them once, and they just get exhausted, because you want to have separate steps for separate things. So you don't want to repeat yourself. So for the 7th item, you have this. For the 8th, 9th, and 10th, you have this. And for the less than 7 items, you have 1 to 6, you have this. And in the 4th option, you say for 1, this is the option. But you have already exhausted that possibility here in the 3rd one. So you have nothing here. So if I change this number here to greater than 7, you will see that I get 1 in the 4th one, but I get nothing in the 2nd, because I have already used it here in the 2nd option. So now the next core feature is loop over items, and that is exactly why I made 10 chapters. So now if you look closely, if I run this, you will see that I have the first item here. So in this node, you have the setting called batch size. So you can separate all your items in batches. So if you select 2 here, the 10 items will be separated in a batch of 2. So you'll have 5 items to loop over. You just have 1 item to loop over because all of the 10 items will go through the loop in just one time. So you can have 10 of the items, and I'll just have it here. The next thing I'm going to do is replace this with some other thing. Right, I'll just say edit fields. I'll just add a random thing here. Edit transformation, and I will add edit fields, and then I'll say hello world. I'll just keep the typo. I don't really care. So I have this edit fields node, and I'll remove this replace node. Right. So now if I run this entire workflow, so now if you look closely in the loop items, it gave 10 items here, and you will see that I have 10 outputs. Right, so it ran 10 times with a batch size of 1. Suppose I separate the batch size to 2 now. And now if I run this, you will see I get 5 items in one go. And then I can just run it again. And then 5 more. So that's how it works. So the batch size is used to control how many items you want to give to the entire loop in one go. And that's how many times it's going to run. The next important node in this entire operation is the HTTP node. I'm going to cover this later in more detail, but the idea is simple. So the method is how you tell the other server that what you're trying to do, right? So that is how it's configured. The next thing is the URL, then the authentication, then we have these query parameters, the headers, and the actual body. So you can look this as like this. I have this actual method, which I have for the API request. Then I have this URL on which I am applying this method. Then I have some credentials, depending if I have any. So if I have the credentials, how am I using it? Is it just username, password? Is it some kind of header auth or some other kind of credential? Even though the credentials are sent as headers, there can be more headers than just credentials. So credential is technically a part of the header. So even in N8N, when you create your credentials here, you see the API request, the code which is sent underneath, the authentication still goes in the header section. The next thing is the body. The body contains all the information that you're sending. And I'll cover this in maximum detail when we reach this section. The next important thing is this execute command. So this is just like your terminal. If I say ls and execute it, you will see I get some information. So the text which you give here is exactly the terminal which is inside N8N. So if I go here in exec, this and this is the same. So if I say mkdir, I think I should get an error because I'm not telling it where exactly I'm trying to make it. So let me just go back to N8N. What I'll do is I am here in files, right? So this is exactly where the folder is going to be made inside of the node folder, right? I'll say mkdir folder 1. And if I do this make directory, that's the full form, make directory folder 1. And if I see the folder now, I should have a folder 1. Now if I do the same here, but folder 2, it should make me a folder. And let's see where it is. There you go. So now you can imagine what's going on. This same terminal is the same here. That's why in many of my builds, I use FFmpeg, which directly runs natively in the container, which is faster than just sending files. Because there are extra steps when you do that. So suppose you use some API service for some image and video manipulation. What actually happens is that service needs the files and the videos. So you have to upload it somewhere in an object store and pass it. So rather than doing this, if I'm doing everything locally, I just have everything stored here inside the container only. And then I can just run manual commands, and that will be faster. Everything will be native, and it will rarely break. So that is the use of execute command. And you can use any kind of command, and you can use any library. There are a billion libraries. There's FFmpeg, there's ImageMagick, there's some other kind of SSL library, there's other kind of server libraries. So you can do anything from here. This is just your terminal. That's what it is. And the next node is respond to Webhook. And I'm going to cover this in detail with this HTTP video as well. Now to configure the respond to Webhook, what I'll do is firstly, I need a webhook. So now if I have this, which I'll add here, and now I can connect this. So now if I activate this webhook, you will see that I will send a production URL for this. Let me see if I can activate it, which I cannot because everything is not configured. So when you're working with these big workflows and some node is not configured, that is not allowing you to do all these things, like you want to save and do something. So what you can do is just click on this power button, and that is going to deactivate the node. And now you can do everything you want. Right, so now I'll just add a production or maybe just test. And now you can see that I can listen for it too. And I'll open Postman and use this to call this webhook URL. So now if I paste the webhook URL here and send it, which is my test URL, Okay, so it failed when I sent the request because I did not select the respond with respond to webhook node. So now if I activate this, we should be working now. So I'll send the request again. So earlier it didn't work because I didn't select the correct parameters, which I had to select from here. So when you're using this respond to webhook, you should select the respond method here. And then you can configure this entire input data, response, and everything you want to respond to. So that will be all for this video. You can get this entire template, which I'm going to attach here.